So just as a short history on our state partnership program, started in '93 with the fall of the Berlin Wall, and we helped the original 13 partners transition from a former communist system into a democracy. And many of those countries have now gone on to be NATO members. Where we are today is over the past 30 years, we've continued to do that, growing between 2 and 4 partnerships a year. Now we've got 88 partnerships with 100 countries. Now, the reason we have a difference is it's a partnership of a multitude of areas, like small countries that are close together. And so when I go back to the conference that we had earlier this month, is the chance to bring all of our state partnership coordinators from each state. We had 11 countries represented there. And every year they get together and they kind of share lesson learned, how they can make the program better. And so my challenge to them was, now we're at 100. As we figure there's probably another 30 partnerships we can do. And so rather than really reach out and, respond to the ambassador or the combatant commander that's, the loudest voice, a couple of years ago what we did is we went to all the combatant commanders and the State Department and said, if we're going to grow about 30 more partnerships, what are those 30 countries? And so we have a list around 40 to 50, and each year we update it. And some countries are always on there. Others come and go, kind of dependent on the attitude of the current leadership within that country, whether or not they like it or they don't like it, or pressure that they're getting from other countries, i.e. China or Russia. And so we continue to monitor that, and then each year we look at trying to add 3 or 4. And so if you look at where we are now, this year the State Department, and in response to combatant commander requests, we'll be adding 3 partnerships. Gabon is one, and the other one is a split partnership between Zambia and Malawi. Basically, they border each other, they're very similar, and so we thought it would be best to have one state partner with them. And then the beauty of the states is in many of these countries, and not all, but in many of them, the country's military is about the size of the National Guard in that state. And so we look for similarities in mission sets and equipment, which is one thing, but then we also look at the community connections. Like this year, one of the most recent ones we signed is between Minnesota and Norway. And Minnesota and Norway have been training together for the past 50 years, informally. And so this was a time when we actually got to formalize that partnership. And the great thing is it was, when we went back to Norway, it was a huge deal. The Queen of Norway was there for the signing. They had a huge dinner. We got a chance to visit a lot of the training sites, and then also we got to see the finish of, they call it Norex, the Northern Exchange that they do between Norway and Minnesota every year. And the soldiers had a wonderful experience, and they shared with us how it went, what they learned from each other, and how much they look forward to seeing each other again.
So that's fantastic.
Yeah.
And then for the existing partnerships that are in place, what does building on those relationships look like?
So one thing that we find is over time, because many of these partnerships, they're close to 30 years old, the people that were captains and lieutenants are now generals and colonels, and the privates are now sergeant majors. And so what we have found is our soldiers and airmen have grown up with them. So in many cases, when someone becomes the chief of defense, sometimes our folks have known them for 20 years and they're very good friends. And so for the existing partnerships, we always try and get to where, what's next? What else have we done or have not done? Another thing that we're focusing on is not just the military to military connection, but the military to civilian and civilian to civilian connection. So the most recent signing I was at was between the state of Arizona and the country of Oman. And the governor of Arizona was there, and she and part of her staff met with many of the leaders within the Omani government. And in many ways, there's a lot of similarities between the climates, the things that their challenges that they face. And so it was a great chance for them to have that connectivity as well. And some of our partnerships, they actually have consulates within their state. like Kosovo does in Iowa. And many of our state partnerships have reciprocal educational agreements to where you get in-state tuition if you come to the United States and go to a university there. And then, having been the Adjutant General of Oregon, we had partnerships with Vietnam and Bangladesh. And the interesting thing about Vietnam is Intel Corporation and Nike had a lot of their manufacturing in Vietnam. Intel and Nike were both headquartered in Oregon. And so when our governor would come over, we would have representatives from those industries that would go there as well. And Bangladesh, interestingly, one of the things we discussed with them, and this was years ago, was their interaction between the civilian community and their law enforcement. They felt there was kind of a barrier there. And so we actually had folks from the Portland Police Department go over to Bangladesh, and they helped start a program called Say Hi to Your Police Officers. And so children coming home from school, they kind of avoided law enforcement, but they taught them to say hi. And then really what it did is it made them realize, hey, police officers are just like anybody else doing their job. And it really fostered a lot of goodwill within the law enforcement agencies in Bangladesh. And it was just a simple thing, but it was just having that conversation, sharing what we had learned with them. And then the other piece that doesn't always get publicized, which is just as important, is we learn so much from them. Like going back to Vietnam and Bangladesh, they have significant flooding every year. And how they deal with that and how they prepare their communities for it are a lot of things that we take back here and go, okay, we could learn from them and how they do this to make ourselves better. So it's just, it's a two-way shared relationship, and we find it beneficial to both of us.